Hi everyone, thanks for joining in. I'm excited to have Carolyn Beecham joining me. Hi Carolyn.
Hi, Jackie. Hi, everyone that's watching.
So Carolyn's a novelist, writer and producer. She is the author of 4 books and her latest book is Esthers Children, which I've got my copy here and I can see your copy there in the background. Her books have been published in the UK and the US, and her debut novel, Maggie's Kitchen, was shortlisted for Booktopia's Best Historical Fiction in 2016 and nominated as Book of the Year, and Carolyn as Best New Author by Rom Today. She has worked in documentary, film, and drama and discovered that she loves to write fiction and to share lesser known histories, particularly those of pioneering women whose lives speak to us now. Carolyn studied the craft of novel writing at the Faber Academy in Sydney, with Curtis Brown Creative in London, and has an MA in film and television and an MA in creative writing. She lives in Sydney with her husband and 2 teenage sons. So thanks, Carolyn, for joining us. And I also want to just mention that thanks to Alan and Unwin, if you do have a question, please type it in comments and you'll have a chance to win a copy of Esther's Children. So, Carolyn, would you like to start off by telling us a bit about Esther's Children?
Yeah, sure. As you said, it's my fourth book, but this time it was a little different for me because I came across the story of Esther Simpson, who was a woman that worked for an organisation called the Society for Protection of Science and Learning, and discovered that this organisation was set up in 1933. And it was at a time when Hitler was, all the academics were being fired from universities, institutions. And so the education establishment in Britain decided that they wanted to help do something about this. And so this organisation was set up, and grants went to help bring people over to the UK and find them work. And there are a lot of high-profile men involved, some incredible people. Einstein was involved, Lord Beveridge, Szilard, who was an inventor and academic. But the person behind the scenes that was doing I don't mean all the work, but the work of writing the letters, finding the placements, bringing people over, was this woman, Esther Simpson. And I was really surprised. I hadn't heard about her before, and I got in touch with the organisation who said that nothing had been written. And so, these ideas, they sort of percolate for a while. And I thought, wouldn't it be dramatic if there was a story about this woman who rescued like these nearly 2,000 people, but couldn't rescue the man she loved? And well, I won't say whether she did or she didn't, but that was the premise, which I felt would be a really strong way into the story and to look at this really interesting part of history, which I didn't feel that had been shared.
And how did you first come across this story or this woman?
Well, it was researching. I think I was working on Finding Edie, which was my last novel that came out in 2020, and I was sort of researching that, and people always sort of warn you, don't go down any rabbit holes, because you inevitably do. But sometimes, you get this feeling that you just kind of don't want to stop. And often you can lose a lot of time, but sometimes you can come across these things, which I did, which was something which, a part of history that I hadn't heard of, because, most people know about the Kindertransport, which was when a group of people got together and helped bring the children across on the train, but people hadn't heard about these academics. And one of the reasons that they're important is because amongst them there were 16 Nobel Prize winners. There were 18 that went on to become Royal Fellows of the Royal Society, and there were people who really, the sort of cultural elite who were responsible for inventions that really helped people, basically. So there was another area of interest as well.
And could you share with us how you go about your research for, well, in particular for Esthers Children?
In this case, I do like to travel and do the research myself, but obviously that wasn't possible with lockdown. So I approached the organisation CARA, which is Council for At-Risk Academics, because that organisation that was set up in 1933 still has its 90th anniversary next year. It's still going today, still doing that work. So I approached their executive director, and he gave me access to the archives that they have. So I had online material of all the people, the grants, their sort of, special fields and that information, it was all, you could see how well kept it all was. And, that it was personal information. It wasn't, I had to imagine, Harry, for instance, wasn't a real person. A lot of people in the book are real characters, but Harry is a composite of all those people that I've read about and just, sparked my imagination. But yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't get across to the UK. All Esther's papers are at Leeds Library. She donated them there. The others are at Oxford at the Bodleian Library. And so there were 2 PhD students that I found that were working there who I asked to go and do some research, which would have been wonderful. But then, of course, they then weren't able to go because the library's closed down.
So that must have been hard.
It was, but I had enough material. I had this really great book, Refugee Scholars, Conversations with Tess Simpson, which was a record of interviews that someone did. So I was able to get, and that was like in 1979 that was published. So I was able to get a bit of a sense of her character and an awful lot of other information from that. And you can't sort of weigh it down with too much. There's enough already. There's an awful lot of information in there, because it's based on real events. So at some stage, you have to stop the research and
and get to write. So how do you know when you've reached that point?
Gosh, well, my editor would say that I don't. No, it's when you know enough, when you feel like you can imagine the world and you don't have to kind of go off again to look things up, I think. The other books that I've written, the 3 of them have been set sort of firmly within the Second World War, but this one goes back to 1936. So I had to research the years leading up to the war as well. And it's also set in Vienna, part of it, which is a fantastic location and setting, with all the beautiful buildings and the culture and everything that was going on there. But again, it's something I had to learn about, to write about, because I didn't really know about. I visited Vienna briefly, but obviously life in 1930s is quite different. And luckily, there's film. There is archive film, and there's photos. It's great that that's obviously all at our fingertips, so that when we can't travel, when we can't do the research. But actually also the Sydney Jewish Museum here in Sydney were great. There's a librarian there, Tinny, who was, when I'd ask her questions, she'd go around pulling things off shelves, and the state library. So the local libraries were really great as well.
Yeah, and we've got a few people watching, so just wanting to remind the people watching, if you've got any questions for Carolyn, please type them in comments and I can read them out, and you'll have a chance to win a copy of Esthers Children. I've got a great question from Elise. She said, do you feel like you formed a connection with Esther, and what's one thing you would say to her?
Oh wow. Um, I I did. It was a very different process actually writing about someone who's lived.
Mm,
I felt at times I felt almost sort of a bit paralyzed, and I had to really move beyond that and say, no, I'm writing fiction, because it's one thing writing about somebody if they were maybe a hobo, but
mm,
she was like this incredible woman with this great legacy, and I felt that I had to, I don't know, get it right. Yeah, kind of honor her memory a bit.
mm,
And I didn't get in contact with her. She didn't have any children. She had three brothers, and I didn't get in touch with her family because I thought, well, then that would be very difficult for me.
mm,
I would quite like to now, but
mm.
also there is a non-fiction book being written about her, and I think that author would obviously get in touch with the family. And
Yeah.
but that's where historical fiction is very different. I think historical fiction writers fill in the gaps in
Mm.
history with the grey bits, but I what would I ask her? Gosh, it's a good one. I'd like to have dinner with her. People say, who would you have around?
Yeah. Yeah.
She'd definitely be one of my dinner guests. That's for
Mm.
sure.
Yeah. She certainly would be an interesting person to talk to. Mm. And Kim says, such an interesting story. What was the most challenging part of writing this book?
Well, it's probably getting the research under the conditions that, not being
Mm,
able to travel and get it. And also sort of the emotional energy in writing it, because it was obviously over the past year and a half, which were quite difficult emotionally. I mean, we feel like we're kind of back to normal and we're just getting COVID and kind of
mm,
back at work the next week. But, when you've got, my son had it twice, and when you've got
mm,
family on the other side of the world you can't see for 2 years, and so some days, it was just difficult having the headspace um, to get on with the writing.
mm,
But that aside, it was really, yeah, what I said about her being a character and just feeling a real kind of obligation to 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 portray her in a way that wasn't contrary to her character. Like, there's a sense of who she is that comes out of here, but there's also this other life, and that's why I wanted to give her the love life that she never had, because she didn't have children.
mm.
She called all the scholars that she helped bring to safety, they were her children. And that's, I think that for me, that's what I felt like I was kind of giving her, is this love life that she never had.
Mm, mm. And could you tell us a bit about how you got into writing? Is it something when you were growing up that you always thought you would want to do?
Um, it wasn't specifically writing. I was always kind of like sort of telling stories one way or another.
Mm,
Playing with my sister. I used to make little books and things, and then I did write stories. And then I used to send things off to advertising agencies, ideas. So there was obviously something within me that wanted to kind of create in some way. But my interest went into film and television.
mm,
Um, I used to watch a lot of musicals and the old, like, I loved old cinema. So, but that again involves quite a lot of writing,
mm,
for research and scripts and stuff. But it was really when I had kids that I knew that I wouldn't be able to be in production full time, because my husband traveled, and I thought, what can I do that I'm using the same skills, and it's really finding out about people and life that is kind of unknown and unexpected, and bringing those stories, because that's kind of what interests me. I don't want to write about what everyone knows. I want to
mm,
find stories that aren't
mm,
known.
mm.
Especially, you have to spend 2 years working on researching, writing, and also if it excites me and it gets me saying, oh wow, then hopefully it's going to do that for other people.
Yeah.
So I didn't set out to be a writer, but there was always that kind of streak, I suppose.
And Elise wonders how many hours a day on average you were writing, and I wonder if there's like any writing routines that you have.
I treat it as a job. So in the morning, I do tend to do some exercise first, whether that's gym or Pilates. But then when I get back, with my coffee, have to have my coffee sitting down. Then I'm sort of straight into writing or researching or whatever it is that I need to do that day. And there's this kind of like belief that you're either a plotter or you make it up as you go along, and I think I'm probably somewhere in between. I think I've got quite a I like knowing where I'm going. I do know what is happening, and I will go back and rewrite what I did the day before I carry on. I won't just like dive in and start a whole new section unless I'm really excited about something and I've got a new idea which I just want to get down on paper or a new scene or something. But I think there's a real value in sort of just rereading, and sort of not necessarily editing, but going over where you left off.
And do you have a favourite place to write?
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it looks a beautiful room. I was saying before, I love your chair.
Yeah. It's we just moved back in after a year and a bit out, so it's really nice being back in here. But
and you said that you drink coffee. What do you have any favourite snacks or drinks when you're writing?
Look, I don't snack too much at the table. I used to bring like breakfast up here and sort of sit and have breakfast and write, but I'm trying not to do that. I'm trying to kind of like have my meals separately and then come in here, but I have to have tea and biscuits in the afternoon. I don't know whether it's the English in me but I have to have my and actually since COVID I've started drinking Earl Grey, which is just weird because I used to hate Earl Grey, but because I can't taste anything else.
Yeah.
So.
And
hopefully I'll go back to normal tea.
Yeah. Hopefully you get your taste back. And Kim wonders if there's any authors that inspire you.
Gosh, well, so most people that I read, inspire me because, you always find something within the work, whether it's characters or, you enjoy the story. But I do like, I've got some books here actually, Paula McLean, The Paris Wife. I think she's a great writer. Of course, I mean, most of them are historical fiction. Kate Quinn. I do read Natasha Lester. I like William Boyd as well. I like Restless. I just find his And Love is Blind. Like everyone else, enjoyed the Dictionary of Lost Words last year. I think there's been some great books out over the past couple of years, actually. And Frances Lyrada's We Must Be Brave. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of books. I enjoyed The Paris Bookseller, the Carrie Mayer book about Sylvia Beach. And I was actually in Paris at Easter and went across. They have the they have the stalls along the Seine, and I came across this Sylvia Beach Prize in short fiction. So I thought that was kind of fun to get. But the other author who I really like is Meg Waite Clayton.
Okay, I don't think I've heard of her.
She actually wrote the book on the Kinder Transport, The Last Train to
Oh, okay.
London.
Yeah, yeah, I do
And
know.
so, because I really enjoyed that, I
Mm,
read this one, The Postmistress of Paris, and it's actually about the same. It's the rescue of the artists from France. So again, similarly a refugee story
mm,
in a way. And Julie Oranger actually wrote about the same thing. And it's just interesting when you read two books which are on sort of a similar area and how differently authors, treat them.
mm. Yeah, the same sort. Yeah, that is
Yeah, so
interesting. Yeah.
that's there's
Mm.
a couple that
No,
I'd
yeah,
recommend.
no, thanks for them. Kelly says your book sounds fantastic. She wonders what the best part of your writing journey's been so far.
Um, I think it's when you can bring these stories out to readers,
Mm,
connecting these sort of little known, lesser known heroines and lesser known stories, and actually connect them with readers, and then readers
mm,
respond. I mean, that's what it's all about, really, isn't it? And that's
yeah.
why um, it's so great. In fact, Esther's actually being celebrated with a blue plaque in her home of Leeds because she hasn't been recognised up to now.
Oh, really?
So
Mm,
yeah, so that's for me that's been quite something as well.
mm, mm,
And the other thing I actually must just mention in case your viewers don't know, but she was also a really accomplished musician, and it was her what she called her passport to the world, and it's how she mixed in these circles as well where she could do what she do and where she did what she did, and you could feel that there was a real kind of intellectual connection she had with the people, and she stayed
mm,
friends with many of them for years and years, many of the refugees, her children. But I've included and Harry, who she falls in love with. He's also a musician as well as an academic. But I've included a Spotify playlist in the back
yes,
that you.
that's right. Yeah.
So if
Mm,
you just use your iPhone or whatever phone, um, then you can get all the music and you can actually listen to it while
yeah.
reading.
No,
And there's some,
I'm glad you mentioned that because I saw that and thought that was wonderful. Mm,
yeah, well, there's some really beautiful pieces. I mean, I'm not
mm,
a classical music person, but really enjoyed sort of getting to know these and listening to them. And
mm,
it was actually a friend who is a musician with the Sydney Symphony Orchestra who helped sort of advise me on this, and also was really important in the research of how musicians work and think and their
mm,
process, because that was part of Esther's identity, and so it was because it was such a big part of her life and a big part of the book, really.
mm,
It was really important to have that.
mm, mm. And can you share with us, are you working on something else at the moment?
I am. Um, I had two books that I was kind of thinking about working on,
Mm,
and then a similar thing happened where I was doing some research and came across something which I thought was far more interesting.
is that
So,
common for that to happen with you?
not really. I would have.
Mm,
I mean, the other books, the other projects would have. I would have happily worked on them, but I think
mm,
this this particular one will be a lot more fun. And people say that you should write what you know,
mm,
and it's something that a world that I'm familiar with. Let's say. So with Maggie's Kitchen, I knew that world. I knew the world because my parents had restaurants when I grew up. I knew what a microcosm it could be and how people relied on each other and the restorative nature of food.
mm.
And it's similar with this one. I think that I'm gonna enjoy the research.
Mm, mm. And the one you're doing currently, is that set in World War II as well, or?
It is. I mean, I don't necessarily want to get stuck in one genre, one era. But I think if there's stories that still haven't been told,
Yeah, exactly.
then, and I do feel and part of me didn't want to write another World War II book because I thought there have been a lot out. I mean, especially in the past couple of years, there's been an awful lot, particularly in the US, actually, I think. But if people want to read the stories and the interest is there, then I think...
Yeah, why not? Yeah. And Kim wonders if you've got other stories that you've keen to write about.
Yeah, there's these two others which definitely I hope to come
You'll
back
go
to.
back to, yeah.
One of them is a parallel storyline, so it's got a contemporary storyline as well as the historic one, which my second novel is getting them muddled up. Eleanor's Secret was a contemporary and historic storyline, and so I would like to do that at some stage, but the historic storyline is actually set in Australia.
Okay.
And that's another reason I mean, I have written in Europe now, in the UK, but there is a local story that I would like to tell.
Yeah, no, that sounds interesting as well. And Elise says that she's looking forward to diving into your new book when it's published.
Well, it was published last month, so maybe we should send her a copy.
I think she means your next book,
that
probably.
one.
Yeah,
okay.
the one that I think that's probably what. And then Sharon wonders if your family members read your book.
They do. My mum always loves to get a copy, obviously. I do have kind of like a close group of 5 who I send the early drafts out to. But they're not all family. But I think my kids have read the first one. They're 16 and 19, so they're kind of like they're like, oh wow, Mom, whatever, boys,
Yeah. And if you could be a character from any of your books for a day, who would you choose and why?
I think it would have to be Esther because when I was growing up, I always wanted to be a war correspondent. We had a one that worked for the BBC called Kate Adie, and she always used to be out reporting from war zones, and I really wanted to do her job. And I think that even though Esther went overseas every year for the music, she was still kind of in the heart of what was going on, and I just think it would have been a mixing with so many different people from all walks of life. I mean, I think that's something that I've always enjoyed, just meeting new people and traveling. So and she did so much good. So
yeah,
that would be a happy part of it as well. And it's World Refugee Day on Monday.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of good to...
It's good to be talking about yeah. And is there any advice that you'd like to give to a new writer?
I think to have a structure definitely helps. I mean, obviously different personalities kind of work in different ways, but I think it really helps having structure and goals that you set yourself. And if that's doing an online course, then that's a really good thing. If you're part of a writers group and you can organise that locally or in your community, then that's great too. But if you don't have that, then definitely I think some kind of either course or mentoring as well. It depends how far down in the process you are. If you've already got some work in a manuscript and you'd like feedback, but just love what you're doing, because if you are enjoying it, then hopefully other people will.
Mm.
You know, if it's a struggle, if you're forcing yourself to sit down at your desk all day, then you kind of have to ask yourself why.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks so much for chatting with me. It's been great talking to you. Um, and yeah, and the people watching, Kim's just said thanks for bringing Esther's story to us. I love learning about history through books. Just wondering, before you go, do you want to share with people how they can keep in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. I'm on Instagram and on Twitter. Do you want me to give you my
If you've got it there. If not,
details?
yeah.
Oh, can't open the page. Where is it? I thought it should be on there. Well, it's basically my name, so it's Caroline, BWCHAM. So Instagram, Facebook. I'm not much of a Twitterer, not much of a tweeter. But definitely Instagram and Facebook. And I've actually got a new website that's under construction and should be hopefully out next week, because there is more that I'd like to blog about, and I am also going to be doing probably 14 days just writer's tips.
Oh, really? Okay.
I feel now like at a stage where I feel ready to share.
Yeah. Well, when
And
you've got that ready, maybe you want to share that in our group as well. That would be great.
oh yeah, no, that
Yeah,
I
when
definitely
that's
will.
ready.
Sort
Yeah.
of, mistakes I made along the way.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, and thanks to everyone who joined in and the ones who asked questions. We had some great questions. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and thanks for having me on, Jackie.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Okay, bye.